There is an app that does menu translation. You hold up your phone and it instantly translates a foreign language menu into words you can actually understand. How about that? This is important if your taste buds have outpaced the Spanish or French or Italian you remember from high school. Say you're in Italy and you see Formaggio Marcio on the menu. And no, I have no idea if I pronounce that right. That is why I need an app. You think formaggio is a familiar-ish word. You're pretty sure it means cheese something and you like cheese, so you order it. And it is cheese. It is cheese with live maggots in it, a Sicilian delicacy, but one you maybe didn't mean to order, if only you had known what it meant. There is no menu translator app for policy. There's Wonk Blog at the Washington Post. Sorry, I have to do my plug, but it is not quite an app. Still, we are going to try to help tonight. You might have heard a term floating around Washington: tax reform, or when politicians get specific, quote, base broadening, rate lowering tax reform. It is the new black. In Washington, it is Bieber and Honey Boo Boo and Gangnam Style all rolled into one.
When Ronald Reagan ran for office, he laid out the principles that he was going to foster. He said he was going to lower tax rates. He said he was going to broaden the base. Those are my principles. Bring down rates, broaden the base, simplify the code, and create incentives for growth.
We're willing to accept some additional revenues via tax reform, a simpler, cleaner, fairer tax code with fewer loopholes and lower rates for all.
It was in Simpson Bowles. Democrats love it too. Base broadening, rate lowering tax reform. It sounds so good, doesn't it? It certainly sounds better than charity destroying, home shrinking, state burdening tax reform. But that is what it actually is. The actual definition of base broadening, rate lowering tax reform that is emerging in the ongoing fiscal cliff negotiations is tax reform that limits itemized deductions among high-income taxpayers. That is a very boring sentence. Do not be bored. This is important. Here's what it actually means. As former budget director Peter Orszag pointed out in a Bloomberg column, 90% of the value of those itemized deductions for the rich comes from just three categories: deductions for taxes paid, mostly state and local, home mortgage interest, and charitable contributions. Look at each of them in turn. First, the home mortgage interest deduction. Most economists will tell you that cutting the home mortgage interest deduction, particularly for rich people, it's a good idea. There is no real reason the tax code should be subsidizing the purchase of more McMansions. So I'm not particularly worried about that one. Second, the deduction for state and local taxes paid. Now, that's just a tax shift. Instead of raising taxes on you by simply raising them on you, we raise taxes on you by making your state and local tax bill higher. Removing that deduction would pound taxpayers who reside in high-tax cities or states, which means it'll hit those cities and states by making them less attractive places for people to live. There's a political valence here, too. All 10 of the highest tax states went for President Obama in 2012, while 8 of the lowest tax states went for Mitt Romney. So that would be a particularly tough tax hike for blue states. Third is limiting the deductions on charitable contributions. And this is the big one. Charitable giving of all of these is by far the most sensitive to tax incentives. After all, you got to live somewhere. You need a home, and it is hard to move to a new state just because your taxes went up. You don't need to give to charity. Nobody makes you. People give to charity because they want to, and also, let's be real, because the government encourages it through the tax code. Orszag reports in Bloomberg, quote, in 2009, households with incomes of more than $200,000 claimed almost $60 billion in charitable deductions, or about 20% of total charitable giving in the U.S. that year. He goes on to cite one study that found charitable donations are cut almost dollar for dollar to the increase in the donor's tax bill. So that could be a $60 billion cut to charities' coffers. Other studies have said it could be half that, although still likely in the many billions of dollars of cuts to charities. That is the reality behind base broadening, rate lowering tax reform. It's not magic. It's more of a magic trick. It relies on obfuscation and misdirection to distract the audience from where the tax increases really are. But it is a tax increase. It is just on charitable giving, on home buying, and state and local taxes. Now, perhaps that is a better kind of tax increase than raising taxes on marginal rates. That is a fair argument to have. But it is the argument we need to be having. Joining me now to have some of that argument is Chris Hansen, president of the American Cancer Society, the Cancer Action Network. Thank you, Chris. You do great work. I'm a big fan of your efforts to cure cancer.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Now, as I said, we all support what you do, but why should we be subsidizing you? Why should my tax dollars subsidize you? And not only you, but operas and museums and rich guys' alma maters. Why is this part of the tax code and should be kept?
Well, let me make a couple of points. One, first of all, we've had a charitable deduction in this country since 1917, I believe, is when it went into effect. It's part of our society. It leverages a whole variety of things. If all the services that are done by not-for-profits, and there are all kinds of not-for-profits out there, and what happens is they do a lot of things that governments would have to do otherwise. I mean, when people talk about making government smaller, it's going to be a lot harder if you don't have charitable organizations that do disaster relief and any number of other things, health services, et cetera. Let me give you the example of the American Cancer Society. So we are the largest private funder of cancer research in the world. In 2011, just to give you an example, we spent $123 million funding cancer researchers. We've spent $3.8 billion over the lifetime of the organization. And you might say, well, why don't we just do that through government instead of doing it through you? Because we do fund cancer research at the federal level through the federal government. Well, the reality is what we do complements what you do at the federal level. So we bring people into cancer research. We fund the early researchers, and we get them started, we get them going. 46 of the researchers that we funded have gone on to win Nobel Prizes.
Well, now let me ask you about that, though. Have you guys run the numbers on what a proposal like this would mean for your work? Do you have an estimate?
I don't think we know how to estimate, to be really honest with you, because we haven't been through it before. We don't have a history in this. The history is the giving that we have. We know that a lot of people do give because of the deduction that's available. What we don't know is how behavior will change if it goes away. We know it would hurt us. We don't know exactly how badly it would hurt us. I'd make one other point. We have, for most charitable organizations, for all charitable organizations, about 75% of the contributions come from individuals. Mm-hmm. In our case, it's actually much higher than that. It's closer to 90%. But these are individuals that are contributing to what they want to contribute to. Another point that I would make is that a lot of times the money that is being spent in these organizations is leveraging volunteer activities. Right. And so that's part of our society, really. That's the way that this country is different from a lot of other countries, and we leverage, all the human capital that we have in this country, and not-for-profits are particularly good at doing that. We have 3 million volunteers with the American Cancer Society, and a lot of the money that we raise charitably actually helps them do the things that they do, like drive cancer patients to their treatment and things like that.
Chris Hansen, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for the work you do and for being with us here tonight.
It was good to be with you. Thank you.